house, and if any Indian tries to stop me, I'll blast him.
You know, the only thing more pathetic than Indians on TV is Indians watching Indians on TV.
Hey everybody, it's Ian, and it's time for another episode of Native Film Talk, and today we're going to talk about Res Dog, Season 1, Episode 4, and I'm just going to get right to it. I stepped away from doing this show for a bit. I did my last episode, my interview with Bobby Wilson, and that reinvigorated my love for the show. That made me realize why I love this show so much, and I just jumped back in. I fell out of love with doing this podcast for a second because of all of the criticism around Res Dogs. Because when I saw this episode, I saw no issues. It was cringy, like greasy frybread was cringy to me. I didn't, just because it was like, it just was whack to me. Like, I didn't like it. I thought it just wasn't for me. But out of everything else, I didn't see it. Any of the anti-black criticisms that, you know, are valid now that I see going back and watching, there's some stuff I'm like, oh wow, that was like plain as day, and I missed it. And there's a ton of like infighting amongst natives. I mean, if you're looking for the anti-black conversation around reservation dogs, it's not hard to find. But if you're not a part of that, or if you're like don't want to be a part of that noise and you just want to be a part of like the memes and celebrating the show, then you don't participate in it and you just go on and love the show. And Season 1 is done now, and we've kind of celebrated it, rightfully so, and we've kind of moved on from this controversy. But Stenjati came out and had some Twitter backlog, had some people dig into his Twitter backlog and basically revisited the controversy from this episode 4, and he has, 4 tweets from his past where he dropped the N-word. And that, coupled with, I think, some of the anti-black criticism, I think Stenjati got, he cut from the show. He released a statement. Well, I say a statement, but he released it is a statement through his social media stating that he's not going to be in Season 2 of Reservation Dogs. And that ignited, once again, another thing, because he lamented how that's not a part of his vernacular anymore, his vocabulary. At one point, he was that, he was a drug addict, he was a domestic abuser, he was all of these bad things, and 7 years changes a lot, and that's when these tweets were from, is 2014, and just kind of like lamenting that about the person he used to be and talking about the person he is today. So regardless of how you feel about that, the controversy around his tweets and this representation in this episode needs to be talked about. I mean, that's why I wanted to do an episode on each of these episodes in Season 1, because there's so much to unpack, there's so much to talk about. It just so happened that in episode 4 there's just all this anti-black conversation to have, and I'm going to focus mostly on that with my final thoughts. But something I will talk about real quick is why I took so long to get to this episode. Is I purposely didn't do episode 4 for a while because I'm trying to figure out how I feel about it. Like I said, when I first saw the episode, I saw no issues, and I just was like, man, it's awesome. And I went into Twitter and I was like, what the fuck? How did I miss all this? And initially, I was very guarded. I'm just like, I initially dismissed it, because I'm like, this is like the greatest party in the world, and you're cutting the cord to the music. Like, what are you doing right now? That's how I felt initially, and there were a lot of natives that felt that way. And once I stepped away from it, and I really tried to see the perspective of our black natives, our black native relatives, I'm like, okay, I see it now. I've taken time and watched other things and consumed other podcasts. I always consume other podcasts, but always listen to other podcasts and other things. But listening to, specifically, there was a People's Party interview with Jaleel White. There was the Fresh Prince reunion show on HBO Max. And along with other interviews I've seen, individuals talking, specifically black actors talking about black representation in television. Their evolution is very similar to Native representation in that, one, it started out by just white people portraying them, and it was all racist. It was all racist stereotypes. No reference to any black people, actual black people. It was just what they thought the caricatures of these races of people were, and it was blackface portrayed by white people. And then eventually you get black people there, but it's only the acceptable ones. Only people that they deemed acceptable to work with. They only wanted lighter skinned black people. They only wanted people that had straighter hair. They didn't want people that had natural, black hair. And then once you actually got black, like darker skinned black people, like they talk about Aunt Viv and Fresh Prince, or they talk about the weird, like the Cosby Show, the parents were both dark black people and the kids were lighter. You have all these weird things where it's like these white dominated shows with minority representation, to now where, you eventually get, BET, and we followed lockstep right behind them. We created APTN in Canada, trying to create content for ourselves, and our evolution of representation follows black representation almost lockstep. It's like we're right behind them. We're like 20 years behind them, I think. But in terms of like running our own content, like curating our own content, running our own stuff and controlling the narrative. But I bring all this up because black natives have lived both of these lives, and you get a show with natives running the show, and you almost set the black representation back. Like you kind of like went backwards, where Sten Jati's portrayal in Greasy Greasy Frybread can be seen as blackface, and I can see that. And there are native rappers. There are legitimate native rappers. There are legitimate native rappers that range to like the Logic, Talib, like conscious rap level. And then you have mumble rappers, just like, there's the disparity in the quality of rap exists, in native communities just like it does everywhere else. But they chose to do this, Greasy Greasy Frybread. And they chose to basically like make a Weird Al Yankovic version where it's just a parody of it. But I think that in Oklahoma, when you have the history with the 5 civilized tribes, the Muskogee, the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Seminole, and you have the history of black natives there, and this is set in Oklahoma. They don't say exactly where, they don't say what res, but it's in Oklahoma, and you don't have any black natives in the show. I can see where all the criticisms are valid. You have people like Lil Mike and Funny Bone and Sten Jati, Punk and Lusty, using black scent, which is AAVE, African American Vernacular English, where they're quote unquote talking black, but they're not actually black. You don't have any black people in the show. I see where some of the criticism is valid, and no show is above criticism. And so some of the fair questions I think should be asked is, do you really understand the people that you're critiquing? Do you really understand the communities that you're critiquing? How accurate should a dramedy, a comma dramedy show be in terms of portraying real life? Because this isn't necessarily portraying real life. It's not a recreation or a retelling of reality. It is, but it isn't. Like, they're not setting this in an actual like real place. This is all just kind of like an amalgam of reality. It's not really set in a location that's based on real events. Like, or I should say, this is all based on real events. It's not actually like retelling real events. It's like, so where is the line? But the one thing I will say before I move on and jump into the episode, the anti-blackness in Indian country is real. And for people that don't acknowledge that, you're kidding yourself. And if you don't think there is, just think back to think back to your res, and think about how just darker skinned people, like how darker skinned people are treated, the rhetoric that's used when talking about black people. And our black native relatives have to go through that. They got to face that shit all the time, sometimes from within their own family members. And so you get a show like Reservation Dogs that everybody celebrates, everybody loves, and episode 4 rolls around and they throw out a few critiques and they get shit on, and they get told that they're wrong, and they get told, what's the big deal? They get told, get over it. And you know who we sound like? Exactly sound like? We sound like the white showrunners that we've been berating and complaining to for years that we're not getting our own fair shake. So the hypocrisy in that has to be acknowledged. And I think the conversations that are going on in Twitter, really, like the battles, the Twitter battles between the keyboard warriors, reinforces the fact that there is anti-blackness that needs to be acknowledged in our communities. And you can't, I love the saying of like, you love our culture, but not the people. It's like you want the parts of black culture that are cool to you, but you don't want the struggle, and you don't want the people. You don't want all the baggage that goes along with it. Just like with natives, people will love to talk about spirituality and using feathers and dream catchers and burning sage, but they don't want to talk about MMIW, and they don't want to talk about uncovering graves at boarding schools and residential schools. Like, they don't want to talk about that. It's like you're picking and choosing what you want from a culture that isn't yours, and we're guilty of that. Every culture is guilty of that to some degree. And so I think the encouraging thing, before I jump right into this episode, is it's an all-native writers show. It's an all-native writers room. It's run by Indigenous people. I'm positive they see all the criticism, even though a statement has yet to come out from them acknowledging it. They've never, to my knowledge, there hasn't been any kind of response to any of the criticism outside of Stenjati not being in season 2. I'm positive that this will be addressed in one form or another. And if it isn't, so be it. If it isn't, it's we just need to continue the critiques and continue to have a critical eye for this kind of stuff, so a show will do better. Because Res Dogs can't be 100% knocking it out of the park. It's just impossible. I mean, this is a maturation point. It's gonna move the ball forward, but we also need to understand that this isn't it. There's going to be more shows after this, and there's going to be better shows after this. As amazing as this show is, and it's still amazing, and I still love it, it's still a maturation point, and then we still can go up from here. So, all right, everybody. Well, let's go ahead and jump right into it. And I still have some final thoughts at the end, talking about more of the specifics of the critiques, specifically with like Low Mike and Funny Bone and Stenjati. But let's just jump right into the show. So, I normally do a cast review. And I've kind of, 1, 2, and 3, I've introduced all of the main characters so far. So as the episodes go on, the cast review really is just going to be new people to the show. And this one is going to be Kimberly Guerrero. Kimberly Guerrero Norris, her married name. Kimberly Guerrero Norris, aka Kimberly Guerrero, is most notably known as Seinfeld's Native American girlfriend. If you've ever watched Seinfeld, there's one specific episode where he tries to date a Native woman who is played by Kim Guerrero. And it's a fantastic episode with like great puns in it. It was one of the first times you ever saw like a Native person on TV, like an actual Native played by a Native. But Kim Guerrero also is in a lot of other stuff. She made appearances in Longmire, Grey's Anatomy, Seinfeld. So she's been around the industry for a long time. She's been an activist, an advocate for accurate Native representation. She's like the co-founder of multiple nonprofit organizations, like specifically targeting Native American youth community, Native Americans and Native American youth within their communities. And I met Kim Guerrero, and this is a real funny story. Maybe not a funny story. This is an odd story because I don't know what company she had. It's one of her nonprofits that she created. It was in Rough Rock, Arizona, believe it or not. Of all places in Rough Rock. It was so random. In high school, my senior year, actually my junior and my senior year, they roughed this group of people from California. I didn't know they were all Native, and now looking back at it, it's so funny because Tazba Chavez, in an interview with Sterling Harjo, talked about this same group of people coming to her res in California. And when she described, she was like, yeah, Kim came to my res and she rattled off like 5 different names, and they came and they taught us poetry, they taught us acting, they taught us mixing music, they taught us how to direct, they taught us like all these things of screenwriting and filming and acting. And that's what got me into acting. And I like immediately, I had like my Dory P41 Wallaby Way, Sydney, people, like, I was just like, oh my god, like, it all came rushing back to me. I was just like, holy shit, I went to that same thing 2 years in a row in Rough Rock, and I met Kim Guerrero twice at Rough Rock, specifically at this kind of camp. It was like a week-long camp where we sat in like poetry classes and went and like, we had the option of going on these different tracks of like, do you want to make a film this week? Do you want to mix tracks? What do you want to do? You want to do acting, poetry? And I chose acting one year, and one of the guys, we went and put together a short film where it was just like dialogue in a bathroom. It's just like high school stuff, it was like all made by high school students. And I remember I won Best Actor. I got a medal for that. They had like a little mini awards festival at the very end, and when the festival was over, I got a medal for Best Actor. And that was like, that always resonated with me, because like that's what got me interested in film, and that's what got me interested in like talking about film. And the following summer I graduated, and then I went to Dartmouth, and my first class at Dartmouth I looked for was a film class, and the first class at Dartmouth I took was Native Americans in Film and Television, and which is why I probably wouldn't have had this podcast without that, and I probably wouldn't have taken that had Kim Guerrero and her troupe had not come to Rough Rock and done that. It was insane. Small world, giant world at the same time. It was amazing. But anyway, Kim Guerrero is amazing. She does so much work like that, and she's impacted so many lives, so many Native lives. I talked about Tazba Chavez. She's a writer on the show. She directed episode 7, and she made an appearance actually in the IHS episode. She was kind of one of the background people. She's a writer on on Resident Alien. She's just phenomenal. And she talked about how influential that was, and got the wheels turning of like, this is possible. So shouts out to Kim Guerrero. In this episode, she plays Auntie B, Willie Jack's auntie, really, who's like everybody's auntie. And she's the one that has the phallic beading. She's the one that beads like everything that looks like a penis and balls. Pretty awesome. So let's jump into the plot. So we get greasy frybread. As I said, I'm gonna skip over it pretty much because I thought it wasn't very good. I didn't enjoy it. I know some people did, but I will critique one thing in the music video. If you're gonna showcase frybread, and I'm gonna potentially start a war here, if you're gonna showcase frybread, I come from the Southwest. Our frybread is the size of like plates, like the size of a cast iron skillet. That's how big our frybread is. We fill the entire skillet with the dough, and so our dough is very flat, very very big. And the frybread in this episode, in this music video, I thought was very subpar. Thought it wasn't a good look for our people. It just looked like fried dough. Didn't look like frybread. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, so the video, or this episode, just opens up with this music video, and then it shows them like cutting off the TV, and this guy, Pumpkin Lusty, is the baby daddy to Rita. Rita, that's her baby daddy. That's Bear's dad. And Pumpkin Lusty is going to be performing at the annual Diabetes Wellness Fair. So all the people sitting at the table watching the TV, they're the planning committee. And so they're like, isn't this great? We got greasy frybread, Pumpkin Lusty coming. It's going to be awesome. We're going to serve big pieces of frybread at the dinner, and it's going to be amazing. And all of this really is to like drive home the hypocrisy in Indian country. Like, this is for natives. Like, the hypocrisy is real. We'll have a diabetes awareness event and talk about, staying healthy and decolonizing our diets, but then we'll serve Diet Coke instead of regular Coke. Our families will preach, don't drink, alcohol is bad for you, don't smoke, it's bad for you, meth will kill you. Now have this Indian taco with a RC Cola, and go eat seconds, go, you look skinny, eat some more, take some pop with you on the road. So like, the hypocrisy is real, and it's ingrained into our culture, and I thought it was great to demonstrate that, because some of that is universal, some of it isn't. And we get to see some good perspective from Bear's mom. Rita, she's torn. She doesn't want to see him, but it's Bear's dad, so it's like, maybe she'll get laid too. So maybe it's worth it to go through with it. That's kind of what she's contemplating. And this is important because of who she runs into later. But Pumpkin gets a call from Rita, and he has it saved as baby mama number 2. So clearly Bear isn't his only child. He's got, he's basically, they're framing him as a deadbeat dad, and they do a great job of it. And so I know, real quick, I know 2 native dudes that do this exact same setup, that have BM number 1, BM number 2, BM number 3, just like this. And it's like, this was too real for me. I'm just like, so these are like based on real people, write what you know. The writers, like, this is where, like, some of the, going back to the anti-black critiques, it's like, I think asking the question of what do you really know about our communities is a fair question to ask, because all of these native writers, they're not writing anything that they don't already know. Like, all of this is based on lived experience, even though they're not recreating reality like they are, because they're writing based on what their life experiences are. So everyone in the writer's room knew somebody like Pumpkin, and a lot of people in Indian country, if you know native rappers, people in drum groups, people that are on the rodeo circuit. There's a bunch of deadbeat dads out there, and that have multiple baby mamas that aren't taking care of any of their kids, and some of that's universal, and some of that the situations in which, or the occupations that they live in, their lifestyle is different, but some of the stuff people can relate to. So Bear hears about this, and he's pumped. He's like, all right, my dad's coming. He's going to not use the money to stay at Best Western. He's going to come stay at the house. We got to get some food. We got to stock up. And so there's great. They're at the grocery store. They run into Jackie from the Indian Mafia. She works at the grocery store. And this is where the conflict starts. This is where Alora starts to get recruited by the Indian Mafia. Jackie from the Indian Mafia is like, quit running around with these kids. You want to get to California? I heard about it. You're never going to get there with these kids. They're going to hold you back. And it's like, if you ever need to come join the Indian Mafia, if you're serious about going to California, come join us. And she says it real subtly, or real quick. She's like, we'll probably have to jump you in or something, but you can come join us. So that gave me flashbacks to my youth. When I first heard about jumping you in, I was terrified. I was in junior high, I want to say. I heard about like how people got initiated into gangs. Like, you had to get jumped in, meant like everybody in the gang had to like beat the shit out of you basically to prove your loyalty. And I was told in a way that made me think, like, at any point, like, gangs could just do that. Like, it wasn't a piece of you, like, getting to know them and wanting to join. Like, I just always thought it was like a disease or like a virus. Like, if you got too close, you could get, it was contagious. Like, if you just got too close to a gang, they could just jump you and automatically you're a part of a gang, and like that's it. Like, you're in the gang life. And that's what it seemed like. That's the way my family would describe it. So it was just like, leave those gangs alone. Don't be talking to people if they're in gangs. And so when she said, like, we might have to jump you in, I just remembered, like, all of that from back in the day. But that's beside the point. So Bear has this idea of, like, okay, so my dad's coming. I want to get him a gift. I want to get him a medallion, a beaded medallion. My dad lives out in L.A., and it's probably impossible to get a beaded medallion out there. He can get jewelry, he can get, gold chains, but he can't get a beaded medallion. Who knows how to bead? And Kimberly Guerrero, this is where she comes in, Auntie B. They go to Auntie B, and she seems crazy. Like, everyone's scared to go knock on her door. She has, like, a bison skull, like, sitting on, or like, a bison. I think it's a bear or a buffalo. I actually don't know whose skull that is. I think it's a bison or a buffalo skull on the next to her door, and she just seems real odd. And she like answers the door holding a box cutter, and so she's like real skittish. But when they come see her, it's cool because she's like, what are you working on? You got anything like you can sell us? And she gives them a box, and they recreate the Pulp Fiction moment where they open the box and like the gold light comes off of the contents and like illuminates everybody's faces that they're looking at it. And it's just like, oh my God. And so I love that like callback to like Quentin Tarantino, Reservation Dogs, Reservoir Dogs. Like, it's all great that they included that in this. And they like sell it, and she's like, it's like a pickle. It's like the least phallic thing. I mean, it's on the nose, but it's like the least phallic thing that she owns. But they decide not to go with it. They're like, what else you got? What else you got? And she's like, I can do a rush order for $90 if you come back tomorrow. Which, I don't know very much about beading, but that is insane pacing to be able to start something and get that done overnight. But yeah, so it was pretty cool. So this is where they're setting up that they're gonna get a freaking basically like penis looking microphone, but he wants a microphone medallion for his dad. So they take off. They run into the Indian mafia real quick on their way out, and the feud continues despite Jackie offering to Alora to link up to get to the Indian mafia. But the next scene after this, so this is where this episode hits some real awesome territory / weird / like super insider with the white man interaction with Rita. Because Rita goes to the bar, and this is a real native looking bar. She goes out, it's like a Shalimar American bar, Windy Mesa, Winter Circle looking bar. Those are all border towns on my res. If you've been to those bars, you know what I'm talking about. If you know, you know. But this is a real country looking bar. And she's at the bar, she sees this white guy across the bar, and the guy across the bar is Garrett Hunland from a lot of things, but I remember him mostly from Tron, the 2010 one where he played Sam Flynn, Four Brothers, and I think I remember him most from Troy when he was, I think he was Patroclus, I think is how you say it, Patroclus, when he's Achilles, Brad Pitt's nephew, and he like dresses or pretends to be Achilles in that like war scene, and when he fights Eric Bana and he gets killed. But so anyway, it's Garrett Hunland makes an appearance, comes up, hits on Rita, and they end up hooking up that night. And so this next scene was so like this needs to be unpacked. There's a lot going on. So he's a doctor, he's a traveling doctor, and she wakes up in a freaking mansion. Like, she's hit the jackpot. She's always talking about getting a doctor dad, a lawyer dad. She gets the doctor dad. She gets a rich white man. And everything seems like, hey, good things are looking up for Rita. You know, she's got punk and lusty drama. She's got all that baby daddy bullshit she's dealing with. But now she hits the jackpot. She gets this freaking doctor living in this mansion. So she goes downstairs and she's like, he's cooking breakfast too? Like, this is amazing. We hit it big. And we learn that he's a doctor. He's a sports doctor for all the athletes in town. But she's getting some weird vibes, or we're starting to get these weird vibes off this dude, you know? So Rita points out, like, stuffed heads, noting that he hunts. And then as he hunts, he's like, yeah, I hunt. I harvested that guy, you know, back when I was a young boy. Rolls up his sleeve to reveals this odd tattoo. And Rita kind of like is like, what is that? She's like, is that a Confederate flag with feathers hanging off of it? And I was like, what the fuck? When I saw that, I'm just like, what is happening? Like, immediately, I was waiting for the lady from Get Out to, like, come out with the cup and, like, the spoon, like, starting to freaking make the noise and, like, go into the sunken place. But this interaction from this point gets weird, because he claims he's a Leonard Skinner fan. It's like, yeah, sure, buddy. That's why he has a Confederate flag. But he says that he's a Skinner fan. That should explain the Confederate flag. But he has the feathers because he loves Indians, quote unquote. And it's strange. We learn of his strange fetish. Like, this white guy loves Native women. And this giant house and this, like, massive plot of land that they live on, it's like his grandfather's land. His great-grandfather bought it off, like, a Creek guy who, quote, when he came upon hard times, he bought it off him honestly. It's like, I swear, I've heard so many versions, so many times of that, of, like, non-natives having native jewelry, native pottery, native anything. Specifically when it's like, there's stuff that natives make to sell to specifically, and then there's stuff that, like, belong to natives that they usually shouldn't sell, or usually you shouldn't have unless it's, like, family, you know? And it's just like, how did this non-native person end up with this crap? And usually there's a story of, like, hang on, this piece of pottery, this piece of jewelry, you know, I got this honestly from somebody. I bought it off of somebody honestly, you know, you didn't take advantage of their situation, of course. That's, like, what you don't want to say. But it's so weird because this Dr. Indian lover guy, you know, reveals also that his best friend is Lakota. And he doesn't just say he's Lakota. He says Lakota. And this whole time, Rita's face is just like, what the fuck is happening right now? He's like, oh yeah, my best friend is Lakota. I text him on the daily, basically. He's like trying to say, and it gave me just like these weird like cringe vibes, because it's like, I swear, when like it grosses me out when like specifically white people like when they order at a Mexican restaurant, it's like, yeah, do you have any tacos, or can I get a burrito or an enchilada? But they like speak regular English, and just that one word, and they don't speak Spanish, but that like one word they like augment, and it just sounds so out of place, and it hit me like in my nervous system, and I felt so weird when Garrett Hunland's character was like, Lakota. I was just like, ugh. It's like when people come up to me and it's like, so you said you're Dene? No. I said I was Navajo. You don't get to tell me I'm Dene. It's like, who taught you that? Like, well, don't come at me with that kind of like confidence, thinking like, oh, this person's different now. This white person I just met, he said Dene. He didn't say Navajo. Very different person. I have so much respect for them. I'm going to invite them to the next cultural gathering that we have. But this like relating, it just keeps getting weirder, because he tells her that his Lakota friend texts daily, by the way, and then he adds to it, he's like, I've always been most attracted to Native women. And then she has this like flashback to like what this place must have been like in her great grandfather days, and he's wearing this like Prince looking, like the artist formerly known as Prince, kind of like shirt where it's like all ruffled and these frills all over it, and having these like native housekeepers, and she's just like, what is happening right now? She's like, I can't, where am I? And she just freaks out, and then she like she just gets out of the house. And as she's leaving, the dude's just like, did I say something wrong? Was it the tattoo? It's like, buddy, out of everything you said, the tattoo, I forgot all about the tattoo. The Lakota, your friend, your Lakota friend, your freaking, I've always most been attracted to Native women. And just like everything he said, buying it off of this Creek man that fell upon hard times. And he even said like his family let him live there, but kept him like way, 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 way on the other side of the property, and would let him, quote unquote, let him come and eat with them from time to time. It was just this weird relationship. And yeah, it was a great interaction though, because, so this is like, I'm laughing about this, but this is where I'm going to get serious about this, because I feel awful for Native women though, because there are tons of men that have these fascinations with Native women, like MMIW, like hence MMIW, like that's why MMIW exists, because of dudes like this, because of the hypersexualized media representation that Native women have like faced for basically all of TV, all of media, everything, squaw, all that shit, like that is all comes from this guy's kind of like attraction. I've always been most attractive to Native women, just either by proximity or from where they grew up or what they've consumed in the media. Like these usually like non-Native people doing this. I mean, there are Native men committing crimes against Native women, but primarily it's non-Native people doing this, because when you have people that come from communities like non-Native communities or have limited interaction with Native communities, and their only interaction is with the media and not with actual Native women, they covet what they see on TV, this like eroticized, this erotic version of Native women. They see this like fucked up version of women that can be like owned and kept like a trophy, just like squaws and all the westerns, come in and they can like come in and see themselves be a John Wayne, save a squaw from the savage Indians, take them from their awful life and let them live among you, and they'll be super grateful and fawn over you because you're the cowboy that rode into town to save them. And it's gross, because in all of those representations I'm talking about, Native women have no voice. Native women have no autonomy. They can't do things without a man. They can't do things without being saved by a white man. And what kind of stuff, like how does that like screw up your perception of like who Native women are, being a non-Native person? And so you get this weird attraction to Native women without fully understanding it. And this, Garrett Hunland's character is amazing because it's MMIW. Like that's where that stuff comes from. And it's gross and it's uncomfortable. And I've seen men do that and say that to me when they find out I'm Native, they're like, "Oh man, I love Native women," and like I'm just like, bro, I just met you. Like I didn't even talk about a Native woman once, especially back east for some reason, because I went to school back east, and so when they find out I'm Native, like, where you from, man? It's like, oh, I'm from Arizona, and they find out, peel back the layers, and like, so what are you? Once they find out what I am, occasionally I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm from the res, from Tuba City. It's on the Navajo res. Like, Navajo? So are you Indian? Yeah, I'm Native, and they're like, oh man, love me some Native women, and just like that kind of stuff, like it's there. It's like I'm just like I'm in New York City or I'm in Boston. What do you mean you love me some Native women? But yeah, I mean, so this was an interaction that I didn't know I needed, but it's great that it's out there, and hopefully it adds awareness, and hopefully it gets people to see like this is a real thing. There are people that have this weird fetish about Native women, and it needs to be addressed. It needs to be talked about, and it needs to be fucking resolved, because our Native women are stolen all the time, and they don't get coverage like this Gabby girl. But anyway, that's a different thing. So the next thing they do after this is we go back to Bear. After his mom's one night stand with the Dr. Indian lover, she goes and gets the beaded medallion from Auntie B, and it's a freaking penis. Like, it is a microphone with the cord wrapped around it, but it looks like a penis. And everybody knows it as soon as they see it. And then after that, they take a step back and they look at all of our inventory. They're like, everything is very phallic here. What the hell? How did we miss this? And beaded jewelry isn't very big on my res. We have coral, turquoise, silver, sterling silver kind of jewelry. So the beaded stuff is a little foreign to me. I've only like seen it from time to time. But this is like next level to make like beaded jokes, like dick-shaped beaded jokes. I thought it was great. Even though I wasn't like familiar with beaded anything, and that's not a part of like my background, it's still, penises are funny to laugh at. So good time. So he's got to take that to his dad. He's like, you know what? Screw it. I'll pay the $90, whatever. And then next thing, he goes on a spending spree a little bit. Because he bought the food for his dad. He bought the Godzilla DVD, now the medallion. And then he walks into the group. He's like, yo, I bought this flashy tracksuit. I'm going to be my dad's hype man, and I'm going to give him the necklace. He's going to love it. And this whole time, like, Alora is just fuming because she's like, you look real comfortable spending my money. Like, this is our Cali money. What are you doing? How are we supposed to get off this res? How are we supposed to get the hell out of here? You just keep spending this without talking to us. And then Rita comes in and sees Bear wearing that while Pumpkin calls. And this conversation is really good. Because Pumpkin calls Rita. It still sounds like he's coming, but this is the conversation where Rita's like, he's not coming. And Pumpkin is in a gas station, like buying something for his son. And what he picks off the wall, what he picks off the rack for his son as a gift, really says a lot about some of the Native people in our communities. And I think that you may or may not get it, depending on what you understand about Native issues. And I like this because it was very subtle. Because you're just at face value, you're just looking at Pumpkin just being a deadbeat dad. But he goes to the rack and he picks off the shelf a tomahawk toy. And you just, unless you're paying attention, you can't really see the hypocrisy that exists, that's very prevalent in our communities. You get Native people walking around with Blackhawks, Redskins, and Indians, like Cleveland Indians gear, just because, like, it looks cool, quote unquote. Like, what's the problem? It's fucking cool. And look at this, like, you'll walk into a store and see, like, headdresses on the wall. They're like commercial, not made by natives, or like suction cup bow and arrow toys at the store, and you're like, oh, fuck yeah, bro, that's our shit, And it's just like, they'll buy stereotypical bow and arrow stuff. They'll buy stereotypical tomahawk stuff and claim to be fighting a culture war, which is what Pumpkin Lusty says he's doing. And he wants to buy that for his kid, not fully understanding, like, that tomahawk isn't made by Native people. It's not made for Native people. It's a commercialization of what non-Native people think Native people do. And it's a stereotype, and it's perpetuating stereotypes by continuing to sell that crap. And Because this whole time he's just like, oh, how old's Bear again? I can't remember, for real though, how old is he, kind of thing. And ends with him like buying his son magnums, because no son of mine's not gonna, be wearing magnums, kind of dad. And there's like universal stuff in there that, people can resonate with everybody. But that tomahawk, him buying a tomahawk toy, was a real great piece that I didn't catch the first time, because I was just like so absorbed with him being a deadbeat dad, and like checking out the gas station and looking where he was to see maybe he's on the res, maybe he's close by, maybe he's like, hey, I'm an hour out and I'll be there soon. But instead Rita's like, he's not coming. And she's like standing outside the house just pissed off, and Alora's like storming out because she's like, they're spending all my fucking money. And Alora's mad, Rita's mad, and I think then this is the best part of the episode, because Rita is like, I'm trying to find a partner, I'm trying to find, I'm trying to like just make a better life for my son and myself. And when I finally do feel like I hit the jackpot, I end up with fucking Dr. Indian Lover over there, and my baby daddy, Pumpkin, is just a deadbeat dad. There's no hope for him. And Sheeta doesn't say any of this, of course, but she just communicates to Alora. She says, I just wanted Bear to have his dad. And then Alora says, I guess you can't make people come through if they don't want to. And Rita comes back with the best thing I've heard in a long time. We're Indian women. We have to deal with reality when they go off and play. And at the end of the day, we're the ones who have to make it work. And we see throughout this that Alora is the Indian woman in her group. She picks up the pieces after the group. She does all the work that the leader does, picks up the pieces when they go off to play, when they go off and blow their money. And you hear it, like in episode 2, she goes and gives a meat pie to Bear, and she's like, here's my cut of the money. There's no use going to talk to Shees and Willie Jack because they spent theirs already. Like, she's the only adult in the group. And it's true. And, Jackie from Indian Mafia sees that. And that's the plight of Indian women. They take care of everyone else, and there's no one to take care of them. It's like that's real. And we see evidence of that in episode 7 when we get to Alora's episode, in that she, even when she has her interaction with her coach, played by Bill Burr, like, she takes care of him. She listens to his stories, listens to him lamenting about her mother's death, but she doesn't have anyone looking out for her. Like, that's the plight of Indian women, is like, they take care of everybody, but nobody takes care of them. And that's not universal all across the board, but for a lot of Native women, that's what it is. Like, think about all the aunties, moms, and grandmas in your community. I think about my mom and my grandma, my Masene, even my Nully. Like, that's them. They take care of our alcoholic dads, our deadbeat dads. They pick up all the pieces. They somehow manage to be the ones working, support the family, somehow raise an entire family, and they just keep it together. They're the backbones of this family. They're the matriarchs. They make decisions. They run shit, and they still pick up the pieces after everyone, and nobody picks up their pieces. And it's tough being an Indian woman, and you can just see that. You can see the pain in Rita's eyes. You can see the frustration in Alora's eyes, and this was an amazing scene. And then the next one is this is supposed to be right before Pumpkin's supposed to get there. Bear and Rita are sitting outside of the IHS waiting for Pumpkin. Pumpkin calls Bear, tells him he isn't coming, makes up some bullshit about like his flight being canceled. He's clearly still in LA. He's lying about him being in the airport. It's not. He's not coming. He says, yeah, I'll make it up to you. I'll be back in a couple of weeks, blah, blah, blah. Bear hangs up and he's fucking crushed. And this hit me hard. Rita immediately goes into Mama Bear mode, and she levels with him. She says, he's your dad, but he'll never be a father. I'll cut him off. I will cut off all communications. What do you need? And at this point, you're like waiting for Bear to say like, yeah, or like to defend Pumpkin, or to even say anything. And she just looks at him and says like, I love you, Mom. And that's all he says. And I love that because this gives, I mean, I'm getting into my positives a little bit, but Bear, this show is amazing. This is setting up why Bear doesn't go to California, why he doesn't want to go to California, because he's got his mom there. What's in California? His dad in LA? Why does he want to go to California? To be closer to his dad? Why does he want to get closer to that deadbeat when everything he needs is in Oklahoma, is there in the town he lives in? He wants to be there for his mom. Like, I think he's starting to see, like, how much his mom does for him, how much his mom cares about him, and how much he needs to be around his mom, because that's the only parent he has. That's the only one he's gonna have. So why is he in a hurry to get the fuck out to go to California? Like, is it really that bad? And I think that's where you start to see that start to develop, and you start to see that depth in Bear. And man, this show is just something else. Like, you know, and then the next scene, they're all hanging out at Bear's house watching Godzilla, and Alora's just like fed up watching everybody like have fun, be kids, and she's just like, I gotta get the hell out of here. Like, I'm gonna go home. And then she gets a text from Jackie, basically like, yo, what up? And the episode ends. So, leaving the cliffhanger of like, so is Alora gonna text her back? Is Alora gonna entertain the idea of going to the Indian Mafia? We don't know. But the next episode is episode 5, and that's that's Cheese and Big's episode. But before that, I'm going to go talk about the positives, negatives, final thoughts, and then we'll take us home. So the positives, this show is amazing because they still find a way to like make native specific stuff while having enough universal truths to like keep a non-native audience engaged. Like Smoke Signals was a weird mix of universal truths and Indian stuff that didn't feel like quite like a hit for both. Like non-natives kind of got it and natives kind of got it, and it was just like this weird line that they teetered. But this show leans hard into native specific stuff, but showing things that like everybody can identify with, like single moms growing up without a dad, absent fathers, but giving it a native lens and showing you some of the very, very specific regional nuances and universal truths within Indian country, like frybread, youth suicide, taboos, the slang, and really specific stuff for this region, like Japan, Dear Lady, Tall Man. It's a beautiful show, beautiful show. Just the depth. And the biggest positive for this show is that giving Bear the depth and giving Rita life. Like no other show would give Rita her due. They would just talk about Bear. And it lets you know that this show is different because they're talking about the plight of Native women. When has a show or a movie ever done that? Ever focused on like the development of a Native woman character? When has that ever happened? When has it ever been that a Native woman is not being sought after, is not being swooped up by a white man, a white male in the movie? When is a Native woman not being raped in a movie? You know, when are they getting dialogue? When are they actually like don't need a man to survive in the world? This is an example of that. They're giving Rita like her due. It's amazing. They're showing like Kim Guerrero's like crazy ass like character. She clearly doesn't need a man. She like answers the door with a fucking box cutter in her hand. Like it's amazing. It's great. And for some people, they're like, oh yeah, you know, whatever. It's like, no, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. Someday it's gonna be normal to show Native women in that regard, and thank God for when that happens. But right now, like for me being, you know, I'm early 30s, you know, it's like I've never seen this. Like this really sticks out to me. So negatives, screen your people when you do your do your background checks when you hire your people. Sten Jody had those questionable tweets. I don't know what that process is like to like do your digging on people, but I think too much rope may have been given with the hiring, but it needs to be more critical moving forward because people change, yes, but you also need to pay the price for some of the stuff you did, and I don't know if Sten Jody did, but he is now because he got cut from season 2. So we need to keep vetting people as much as we possibly can because we're given the opportunity to tell our stories. We have to keep controlling a narrative. My biggest fear is regression, that we get it in too deep with somebody, like, and then the rug gets pulled out from under you, and you end up with a Michelle Latimer situation, where you're like, well, we gave them all this rope, and look what they did. They hung themselves. Well, I guess we can't trust those natives with their own show. We got to go back into the writer's room. We got to go back and run the show and be the executive producer, you know? So that's negative. But final thoughts on on this episode, on the anti-black conversation around the series. I think something very important to note: people aren't calling for this show to be canceled. And I think that's very important to point out. There's a lot of people that are thinking like, "Oh, this shit's gonna be canceled. They're just trying to get this canceled." Some people are calling for that, and I think that's ridiculous. But really, when you listen to the commentary that black relatives or black native relatives are talking about. They just want to be included. They're like, there's black natives in Oklahoma. There's black natives like in these tribes. There's freedmen. Include them in this narrative. Include them in the story. Include them where you're filming. They're not in any way saying like, give this show over to black natives. They're not saying that. They're not even saying cancel it. They're saying include us. You know? Because that's the name of the game. That's what we're all talking about all the time. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Be inclusive. Include the voices that matter. Include the voices that give accurate representation to your communities. And yeah, I mean, they got season 2. Thank God they can get it right. They can correct it. But if they don't, they don't. Continue to critique things so that we can get it right. Because Indian country, we got a lot of cleaning up to do in our own communities before we can even begin to say like what accurate representation looks like in television. And I think that's all I'll say about really that particular piece. So episode 5, I'm going to talk about that next. But this show, man, still I love this show, you know? I think we can celebrate this show still. This show is amazing. It's a maturation point. Sterling Harjo is doing the podcast tour. He's getting on Mark Maron's podcast, Bobby Lee's podcast. Like, he's doing the road and talking to people about this show. Like, he's getting out there. And people are going to know Sterling's name. And Sterling's going to continue to lift people up. And he's going to lift other people's voices up. And he's going to give them their shot. And that's exciting. So our issues with representation right now, like, it's going to get better. It's going to get better. It's never going to be perfect from the first time. And there's always room for improvement. And I think that, you know, that's my glass half full perspective. And there is a lot of cleaning up we need to do in our own communities. But with this show, like, I love it. I fucking love it. Like, 4 episodes in, and it's amazing. Like, we've already addressed how, like, we're doing a lot of world building right now, and we're going to have 4 episodes dedicated to the core 4. Episode 4, 5, 6, and 7 for Alora, Cheese, Willie Jack, and Bear. And it's framing why this decision to go to California is so difficult. Because at first, you would just think, like, this place is fucked. I don't want to be here anymore. This res sucks. You know, you demonstrated that in the first episode. It's a shitty place when you look at it. There's poverty, there's lack of opportunity, alcoholism, high rates of youth suicide. There's high rates of everything that leads to continued plight. It's a perpetual state. It leaves us in a perpetual state of poverty. Like, there's language loss. There's so much crap here. Why do I want to be here? Why do I want to stay? Seems like an easy enough story, right? Those kids just got to scrape together enough money to get the hell out of Dodge. But in these 4 episodes, this being the first one where we learn more about Bear, next episode we're going to learn more about Cheese. We're peeling back the layers in these kids' lives to show cultural, familial, community ties. And why this show is amazing is some of this stuff is universal, but some of this stuff is just for Native people. And this next episode, episode 5, is, man, this is for Native people. Like, this next one, holy shit, I'm so excited. Episode 5 is my favorite because of Dear Lady, because of just, you know, that whole episode. All right, everybody, I'm done. Talk to you later.